Before I get into this video, just remember to follow me on Twitter. People keep telling me I should plug my Twitter more, so yeah, check that out, at Jackson Kruger. The link is in the description, but anyways, back to your regularly scheduled video. So one of the things that I'm personally trying to make more of an effort to do, and this is going to sound kind of funny, but I'm going to try to use less logic when I make my opinions. And what I mean by that isn't I'm going to just randomly make an opinion. I mean, I'm going to try to use more data. Again, I've talked about this before, the difference between using data and using logic. Logic is important. You have to have that as an aspect. But in my opinion, if you can use data to figure something out, you should always do that before just basically guessing. And I think this could be a good example of just a way that we can use data to help us make a logical decision, right? So basically my point is, the question is, when should you start your rookie quarterback? Should you start a rookie quarterback week 1? You hear people say the best way to learn to play football is to play football, whereas other people say no, you let them sit, you learn that way. So what's better? What makes what tends to have a better hit rate? When you have a quarterback who doesn't play right away or when they do? So I wanted to just honestly run the numbers and see what's the case. Because again, it's this weird thing in football where we can prove some of this stuff, but for some reason, nobody really goes out and actually looks at the numbers. At least not too many people. It seems like there's a lot of, again, completely logic-based arguments with no data about it. And I don't have a problem with using logic, just, it should come based on the data, not, ignore the data, just use logic. So let's look at what the numbers say. And first I have to explain, how do you come up with numbers for this? What I did was I simply just looked at the list and I simply just said, okay, who has been drafted in the first round at the quarterback position, and did they play in the team's first 2 games? That's all I did. If you played, did you play week 1? Did you play week 2? So then I had 2 different categories. Every quarterback from the past 15 years who was drafted in the first round who played in games 1 or 2, and every quarterback who didn't. That's the way I did it. And then what I did was I simply just said, okay, do I consider this quarterback a good quarterback, or do I consider them a bad quarterback? And some of them are retired now, but I still said, okay, were you a good quarterback when you were playing? And while that's not exactly the most scientific way to do it, it's still pretty good. There might be, 1 or 2 things that you might disagree with me on, but as a whole, we're going to agree on, if, I think there was about, it was 44 total quarterbacks. We'll probably agree on like 42 or 43 of them. So I don't think the 1 or 2 is going to make a big difference. So in the 24 times that a quarterback sat out both weeks 1 and 2, and usually it was much longer than that, but again, I had to come up with some sort of cutoff. That's what I went with. Typically, 9 out of the 24 of those guys ended up being good. So that's 37.5%. Now, one interesting thing that I thought of with this list, which could create some sort of a selection bias, is it's possible that if a quarterback is sitting, part of it might be because they're more of a project quarterback, and I would say project quarterbacks have a less likelihood to hit in general, so that's a factor as well. So there is some sort of selection bias. So when you move to when a quarterback plays, you have this, a much higher hit rate, right? 13 out of the 20 ended up being good. So 4 more ended up being good, and there were 4 less taken. So that is a higher hit rate. Now, again, when I say the actual numbers, it doesn't sound as crazy, and there is some volatility. It's not a huge sample size. I went back 15 years, and I feel like if I went back further, we'd then get into the point where it's sort of like, how do you really sit here and say that this is good or bad? And if I went back any further, football has changed so much that I just feel like it's different talking about someone who played in the 90s versus someone who's playing now. It just feels like a different sport. So I don't really want to use data from that far back. I also feel like when we talk about second round quarterbacks, it becomes a whole different thing. So I don't even want to pay attention to that either. So I figured this is the best way to do it. It is a bit of a small sample size, but I do think that there is some intrigue here, right? The numbers do slightly suggest, and it's not that slight, 65% to 37.5%, so it's almost double, but not quite double, but almost double. And the question really becomes, is this luck or is it an actual real thing? My bet, using what I've seen, is that it's probably better because of this that it's probably better to just have your quarterback play week 1. I don't think it's a massive deal. At least the numbers I can run don't seem to make me believe that there is a clear and obvious way to sit here and say, yep, you got to make sure that your quarterback plays week 1 now, or nope, you got to let your quarterback wait. I would say that what this data does tell me, and I do believe this a little bit more so now, is that if you want to bet on a quarterback to have success, it probably is fair to say that if a quarterback isn't starting week 1, that's a little bit more concerning than if a quarterback is starting week 1. So it looks like Justin Fields and Zach Wilson will be the week 1 starters. So if they are, and those are the only two, you probably would be, making safe bets by saying those two guys will be the top 2 quarterbacks drafted. And if we're being honest, that's probably a safe bet regardless. Whereas, the other guys, like if Trey Lance doesn't end up starting, maybe that gets you a little bit more concerned. Again, probably not a huge deal, but just a little interesting thing to look at, and I figured that we could, use this to help us come to our conclusion a little bit better about this kind of thing. I think me personally, I would probably say if there's if I drafted a quarterback with the first overall pick, I'm going to play him. That's just that, unless there's evidence to show me that it's a bad idea. And I guess maybe the one thing I'll say as well is, there might be some guys where it might just be a case-by-case thing as well. Maybe you should sit here and say, okay, Fields shouldn't start, but Zach Wilson, he should, or whatever you think is the case. Sometimes it is a case-by-case thing. If I'm being honest, I probably considered it a case-by-case thing before compiling this data. After the data, I probably lean towards just have your quarterback play week 1. If nothing else, it'll sell tickets. So yeah, that's what I think. What do you guys think? What is your opinion on this? Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.